All right. Good stuff. All right, let's jump in. Good crowd for a summer week. All right, so last week, I'll do a quick review, because it was meant to be a build-up to getting in now to what I want to talk about this week, and is eventually going to be a build-up to what will probably take till next week till we get into the nitty-gritty of it, which is probably why most people are here. You want to get the actual practical shilas, but for your schedule C's or whatever, what's the deduction on schedule what? Itemized deduction, Schedule A. Okay, so for your Schedule A, we'll have to probably wait till next week to get into the practical. But what I want to do this week is build off some of these sites from last week and come and explain a lot of the background to where this Indian of Meiser comes from, as far as the mitzvah Tzedaka is concerned, and that will help us hopefully understand, get a certain perspective on and understand a lot of the numbers we're going to. So, the kids are last week. There were two. I think there was one point, the ikr that I want to make that has a 1A and a 1B to it, and it's essentially that mitzvah tzedakah is not just about making sure aniyim have money. It's not just a mitzvah about giving aniyim money. It has as much to do with us, hopefully us, the giver, as it has to do with the person. Has to do with the person receiving the money. It's a certain, what the Ravaz will get to is it's a transactional relationship as far as the Ravaz is concerned. But even just there's a back and forth. There's a reciprocal relationship both ways between the giver and the taker. It's part of a vision of a society that's where everyone is together in something. We don't see our nechasim, our possessions, what the brachos that Hashem gives us, as being specifically ours in a way that we look at it in a shali shalcha dik way that the Chazal say is midas doim. But rather we see everything we have, all the brachos in the Rebbeinu Shalom, as being part of a bigger purpose, part of a bigger klal, and it's as much a matana for the ani as it is a matana, an opportunity for us to be misaket. And a lot the emotion of the act is as much important as part of the act in ways that don't necessarily apply to other mitzvahs. As far as the psukim, the psukim refers to the lave. The samet says levav close the lav. Don't be stubborn in your heart. It's possible that you have to do it with a smile. It's not just a kavana within it. It's part of that's an act. How the hurt that the ani has if you don't give him becomes part of the oven. It's not just the fact that you didn't do tzedakah. It's that the ani was hurt by it. It was inspired to the Rebbeinu is why Hashem says, I will come after you for it. And it says also as much part of the way we relate to avodas Hashem b'chlal. That's why the psukim say that at a time that you are not listening to the voice of Hashem, which is the way Chazal see the psukim, even though it's not mefurish in the psukim this way, but that's how the Medrash tells it to us. Where is the pasuk again? Tesvav. What's it? Tesvav? Maybe it's Tesvav. It's got to be Tesvav. Yeah, and it says over here that the way the Mepharshim explained is there will always be avyonim because you need avyonim. That's essentially what Rabbi Kiva told Rasha, that we need avyonim for ourselves to be masaki whatever midos within ourselves, within avodas shem b'chlal that needs tikkun is part of the mitzvah tzedakah. That was Yisoid Aleph from what we discussed last week, that the mitzvah tzedakah is not just about giving avyonim, it's not just about giving poor people, it's about yourself, and that's going to be an important background information.
Could you break that down at some point? Could you break that down at some point?
Explain what you mean by break that down.
Why I know you touched on it last week. Why we need avyonim and
okay, I'll get a little more into it. Yes.
Way more than.
Okay, we'll get. Yeah, I believe I will do that. We'll see if it's enough to satisfy you, but I believe it will. We will get more into that. There was also an important aside that I touched on at the end from their advaz that he understands that mitzvah tzedakah is a transactional. There's a transaction element to it. What he meant by that is he said the halacha ma'isa Bezdin forces on mitzvah tzedakah what they believe you should be giving because you owe it. But it's a shtar choiv. He says it's just like Bezdin forces prei choiv. You don't need a mitzvah to force. The shaila is why do we force a mitzvah tzedakah? It's mitzvah shmat and start with seed. The pasuk says Hashem will be mavarip you. Zok darvas because it's just being prei choiv. It's prei choiv. You owe it. And says the advice, and therefore Hashem owes you back for it. That's part of that's this three-way relationship that we're describing. It's between you between the person giving the oni, right, and then Hashem giving back to you. There is a transactional element going three ways here that brings this inyan back to you. This idea, this transactional element of tzedakah, I think goes all the way back to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is the Mechadesh, Pashas of Mitzvah Tzedakah, but not necessarily the way we know it in terms of Yonim. What he says is, as he's going out to Beis Lavan, he tells Rebbeinu Shalom, he makes literally a business deal with Rebbeinu Shalom. He says, if you watch over me and you protect me and give me bracha, whatever you give me, I will give you Meiser on. So it goes back to this concept of this transactional element to tzedakah, where we demand from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and say we will do if you do. And normally we don't do that with mitzvahs. We don't play those kind of games. But here we say that we will do if you do. That's part of the chefs of Meiser. We're allowed to test Hashem. V'chanuni no bezois. We're allowed to test Rebbeinu Shalom when it comes to Meiser. We say by vidoy Meiser, the Parsha vidoy Meiser. You say I did my part. We'll see soon the psukim in Parshas Kisavo. Before you know it, we'll be reading Kisavo. It says I did my part. You do your part. That's essentially what we say. That's part of. There's a business deal.
If you give me, I'll give you back. And we're saying if we give, then you have to.
But I understand. Yeah, it's you're right. Where it's starting from, but the point is that there is this sort of tit for tat element.
Can you give
goes,
more in advance and then say, "Kosh Baruch, I gave more already. Can you do your part?" What I would say. That would be a perfect way to say it. I say, "I'm giving this now."
Yeah.
Even before I can take
Perhaps,
a Meiser.
I would think so. But even without that, even without getting that, just the Meiser itself.
How do you take Meiser on something you don't have?
You could take Meiser. You could take Meiser earlier. It's a discussion in the place. On future, it's a discussion in the place. We'll get. I don't want to get into specific shiloh now, but we'll get into it in Mitzvah next week. But yes, it's a shiloh in the Paiskim. Just very interestingly, in Ha'ara that hit me a couple weeks ago, it says in Parshas Chukas, Klal Yisrael comes V'yishra Kanani Melech Arad, that after the Misas Aaron, Kanani the Melech Amalek. The way Chazal say it here is that Klal Yisrael is vulnerable. Yishmenu Shavi, and they're the first ones. Again, Amalek draws a little bit of blood for Klal Yisrael. Vayider Yisrael neder Lashem vayomer. Yisrael makes an Hashem, and they say Im noson tita zom is a biyodi. A singular lashon here, a very interesting lashon. Klal Yisrael doesn't say biyodenu. It's a whole nation talking. But the way the pasuk says it is Yisrael, as a singular person says, if you give Amalek in our hands, we will be menader their areim to tzedakah. What's the singular lashon of Yid Yisrael neder v'yomer? If you give us biyodi in my hand, I think that I believe what I would suggest is that this is a remez to Yaakov Avinu. That's what they are invoking, the power of Yaakov Avinu here, Klape Amalek, and they're saying the same way our forefather Yaakov Avinu said this. We are going to invoke his klal, and we're going to say, if you do this for us, we will give you tzedakah. We will be menadev to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So we invoke. I think the Pasham Shukim is invoking that klal. Now, what is the shiur for mitzvah tzedakah? Okay, so we have this parsha. The parsha in the Torah is ki yebecha evyon. You have a poor person, ba'achad sharecha. You have to give them nosan tita. And there's a lav and an essay. What is the shiur for this mitzvah? Very, very important question. Now, the truth is the shiur is mefurish in the psukkah, except it's it's a tough one. But the shiur, as the psukim say it, what do they say? Whatever he's missing. As I said, whatever he's missing, by the way, is not a universal thing. Whatever he's missing, it's personal. Whatever he is used to in his life, whatever they say is considered standard lifestyle things, not excess, not luxuries, but are standard part of his life. It could be, a cleaning lady is part of his standard lifestyle. If that's part of it, that is the shiur mitzvah tzedakah be'etzem. That's the simplest answer to the question. Now, obviously, that leaves us almost at an impossible. It gives us how are we supposed to do that? So let's see the Rambam how he paskins these halachah.
But that's not what we have to give. That's what he has to get.
No, the pasuk is telling that's an interesting point, and I think you're right to a certain extent. But it's important to keep in mind that the pasuk is talking to each person. It's telling the mitzvah says it to the individual. You would be right if the mitzvah described in the pasuk was a mitzvah on Klal Yisrael. There are some mitzvahs like that. There are mitzvahs on Klal Yisrael. And then it said, you'd be right, but it's not. It's talking to individuals. Every individual has a mitzvah tzedakah.
Right. Every single person you meet that's lacking in anything like this, you would have a status to cover.
if he's an ani and was lacking in something that he's used to having, theoretically. Well, obviously obviously it's not going to be true, but I
He has a
mean,
point
practically.
where
But
everyone has one person. It's like
Right, it's not like I have to.
you're always going to find somebody who has
Well,
less than you. You're always going to find even an ani.
There has to be someone who their lifestyle is used to having something and now they don't have it. Not that they have less than you. Now what you don't have to give him what you're used to. You have to give him what he's used to.
Right.
Okay.
But I don't have to give him what he's used to because that's too much for me to give. So that's between
Well,
me and
okay. So
him.
now you're suggesting you're putter from what the mitzvah Torah is because it's too much to give. But I'm just.
That's like
Right.
So let's get to the practical. I'm saying obviously it's not true that you have to give every person David Sarsaskala. You'd be broke, right?
Right.
So obviously that's true. But I'm just. But this is what the pasuk says. So let's get one thing straight first. The pasuk says David Sarsaskala. So how does this? How do we work with this?
You have to spending over.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Let's. What? Yeah. Yeah. That's maybe that's not an irresponsible spending. Maybe that's Okay.
That's the reason why
Right.
he's poor.
Mitzvah says tzedakah laniyim k'fima shoroi lo'adi. It's a mitzvah's essay to give tzedakah laniyim. I'm reading for the Rambam here. Rambam Hilchos Matnas Laniyim Perek Zayin. Mitzvah says tzedakah laniyim k'fima shoroi lo'adi. Whatever is fit for him. Im ha'isa yad ha'nosim aseka. So first we've got the first call going to the Rambam. It's obviously only im ha'isa yad ha'nosim aseka. It's only if you can afford to do that. But that is the mitzvah. Your mitzvah is to do that if you can afford to do that. If you are blessed with unlimited wealth and an ani comes to you, you have to be giving him. You have to give him whatever he needs. Now, obviously, also there's still going to be a caveat to that because not every person, even if he's blessed with tremendous wealth, has every ani knocking on his door and just telling him, okay, what do you need, and writing a blank check. That doesn't happen. That's not reasonable either. They would be, besides the fact that they'd be broke very quickly. It's not a reasonable thing to accept. So we'll get to that. But let's just read a little Rambam here. Okay, and then he brings the psukim and he goes through what could be normal, what he may need. Fine. Now, let's say an ani comes and asks for what he's lacking. And you can't afford this. Then you give him what you could afford. Okay. Vikama, and how much is that? Vikama, how much is that? What you can afford. He just says, right? So something strange about that sentence. Give him what you can afford. Vikama, how much is that? Okay. So we have to explain that. What does that mean? Ad chamishas nechasav, mitzvah namufkar. The mitzvah namufkar, the best way to do it is a fifth of your money. That's the mitzvah namufkar. The echad me'asar nechasav is beinoni. If you are not beinoni, then you give 1/10 of your money. Pachs mikan, if you're giving any less than that, ayin ra, that's considered having a certain, let's say for lack of a better term, cheapness to it. You're being too not miserly. I don't know if karg is is too strong of a word either. I mean, those are just other words for cheapness. It's more the way I look at ayin ra is that more that your way of looking at the world and how you relate to your own money versus the right Islam is just not right. What?
Tight-fisted.
Tight-fisted.
Tight-fisted. It's a word.
Oh, tight-fisted. Tight-fisted. Okay, fine. Now, so that's the thing. This is a Gemara. This is a Gemara of Baba Basra that says when you give tzedakah, person should never give less than a third of a shekel every year. A third of a shekel every year is like I think maybe $2 or something like that. That's how much. We learn it from a pasuk in Nehemiah, and at times of Nehemiah they said every person has to be giving to a certain cause. I'll get to what the cause is later, but a shlish shekel person has to give a year. So that is a minimum amount. So you have here like two ends of the spectrum with this strange in between. You've got the first end is Damon giving the ani whatever he needs if you can afford it. If you can't afford that, gray area in the middle, 1/5 or 1/10. Less of that as ayin ra, but at least a person has to give pachas b'shisa if you want to be mekayim mitzvah tzedakah. So we have to figure out where all these things land. And just to point out right away when you listen to this Rambam, it doesn't. You have concepts where a Rambam or Paiskim will tell you such and such a shir is lichatchila, maybe lichatchila, such and such a shir is more b'diavad, and such a shir is like just k'dei lotzes the mitzvah, at least k'dei lotzes mitzvah. So that's not the language the Rambam uses here. He says a person supposed to give is supposed to give what an ani can afford, what an ani needs. If he can't afford that, chamishas mitzvah mufchar, then is beinani, ayin ra, and then there's the minimum amount that a person should give during the year. So it's a little bit of a different way of phrasing, which is something that needs hadar. Okay.
What was the amount in the minimum?
shlishis a shekel, a third of a shekel, which is it's about like it's like $2.50, something like that, for an entire year. And that, by the way, everybody needs, even an ani needs to give that. That is a chiyuv. That is a chiyuv mitzvah tzedakah midaraisa. That we pass even aniyim or nechon. That at least one, every year they have to give at least one.
That's called like specific monies that we give. Like for example,
I don't know why it's. What do you mean by it's separate?
Like for example, shekel. Like this is separate from.
Yeah, this is separate. This is the l'kaim mitzvah tzedakah. L'kaim mitzvah.
Could be Mekayim with Meiser, no?
Yeah, you can, this will be part of the meiser is above. Right, when you.
Assuming you're not giving anything else, the things that are.
But matanos levyonim and they're not. No, definitely not. They can't. No. Right. We'll talk about even other things that we do with meiser can't be used for this shlish shekel.
Is this pre-tax or post-tax?
We'll get there. All these practical things are for the Schedule A next week. We're getting the part now. Okay.
Just keep giving.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so first things first in this Rambam. What is this? This Rambam has the shiur of kifiyah sagasadu. If you can afford it, if you can't afford it, it's a fifth. So why don't we say, give what you can afford, however much you can, up to what the owner needs. Give what you can afford. So I think the idea is as follows. I think it's a pasha, didn't it? And it's really the Ramah, I think, says the var. We'll get to which Ramah I'm referring to soon. But the idea is as follows. There is a certain type of person who has endless amounts of money. He could, when I say endless, obviously everyone has a certain amount. But as far as giving aniyim, as far as giving a tenth and a fifth, it's nothing basically for this guy. A guy who has hundreds of millions of dollars, right? What's a fifth of $1 million, right? 50 million?
200,000.
No, what did I just say? 100. No, 100. I meant to say 100 million. No, a million's not enough. I said hundreds of millions. Okay, I really meant to say $1 billion. I think, but okay, fine. Let me get 100 million. Okay, right. A fifth of that is 20 million. Correct. Thank you. You're looking at me like, yes, I get it. Okay, 20 million. The bottom line is a guy really can afford to be giving 20 million. He's not going to be in the poorhouse if he's giving more than $20 million, even up to 25. A guy has $300 million, right? Right? 60, right? Okay, so a guy has $300 million. Right? If he's giving 100 million of his money, he's giving a third of his money, he's going to be fine. There's going to be no problem with it. So such a person, maybe it depends. Someone is being. So the point is that for such a person who has that much money, there really isn't a shiur chaimich. It's really damn it. He has to make sure aniyim are taken care of. Now we will see. By the way, I could just. Read it to you right now that the Shulchan Aruch does paskin. It's Ramah. He says v'nira decholze begabe tzedaka or rabim biyachad. This is what you were saying. It's all the rabim biyachad. The Ramah is saying the shiur of dei mechsar. Aval ein hayochid mechuyev litin l'ani dei mechsar. And yochid is not mechuyev to give to an ani what he's lacking. The ani has to be rabim, meaning an ani comes to his rich guy and is like, I don't want to tell everyone I'm poor. I want you to take care of me. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. This is how much I need. I need a fraction of that for me to live. I want you to take care of me completely. The guy could tell him, no, go to the rabbi. There's a rabbi. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of wealthy people. Go to them also. I don't have to take the entire burden of this. But so what's the vart? Then why am I saying it's a din for yachid? He's saying if there is no rabbim, what's the example? Maybe you're on an island, right? There is no. You are the one gevir. Everyone is perfectly middle class. You're the gevir. There's one ani. The din is you have to be providing him what he needs. Im yodam asagas, if you can afford it. Okay, so that's the first darga. That's the guy who's got so much money he really doesn't have to worry about. Now you've got the next darga. The next darga is the way the Ramah describes as someone that it's possible he could be mitzdarech lebrios. He's Baruch Shem. He's doing very, very well. This guy, but it's possible that he could end up in such a situation. Let's say you have a guy nowadays making $1 million a year, even very, very nice amount of money every year, right? And I have a close friend who's doing this, making about $1 million a year. But he tells me he's not swimming in money that he never has to worry for the rest of his life and never has to worry for his kids for the rest of his life. The bottom line is, at the end of the day, taxes and moisters go crazy at you, and at the end of the day, Baruch Hashem, he's fine. He can go to Eretz Yisrael for Yontif. No, we don't have to worry about him. But I'm saying, but he's not right. No, it wasn't bad. But my point is to bring out the point is that you can even, especially nowadays, you can be making $1 million a year, and I don't think you're begeder dei mechsar sheichoslo kifiyod maseges. You can just be giving on you whatever you want. That's where the Rambam Shiurim come in. Mitzvah namufchar is echad mechamishus. If you can do it, give 1/5. That's even the best. If you can't afford that, at least try to give meiser. I think a guy who is making really $1 million a year can probably give echad mechamishus. Can probably give the mitzvah namufchar of 1/5 if he's at least a little bit careful with his money.
There's always post-tax.
Post-tax, yes.
So you're not talking 200,000, you're talking 100,000.
That's it. Yeah. So he should be able to give. Someone's making $100. He should be able to give echad mechamishus. So okay, taking it.
15 million. After
Echad mechamishus is over 1/5. It's over 1/5.
Oh, fifth, that's what you said.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I think the second other argument. Now, a person just there's a good shiloh here. Most people know Bavli, right? Most people aren't so familiar with Yerushalmi. They know, what does the Bavli say? There's a few Bavlis that everyone knows. One of the Bavlis that everyone knows is Hamevazves al Yevazves as Mechoimish. Someone who's giving Yevazves is a very interesting lashon. It means like someone who's just like squandering his money. It's an interesting way to refer to someone who's giving tzedakah. But Hamevazve is someone who's just like being almost irresponsible with his money, should not give more than 1/5. So why is the Rambam passing mitzvah namufchar to give 1/5? It's mashma, the Bavli is mashma, Hamevazves al Yevazves yosh mechoimish,
This
right?
is one that everybody knows. That's the
What?
Bible that everybody knows.
It's a pretty common. It's a pretty okay. You know that the Bavli says don't give more than 1/5, right? Yeah, everyone. I'm saying that. Okay, maybe you don't know the lashon. I'm saying, you know that there's a Gemara that says don't give more than 1/5, right? You referenced it last week.
I know there's a place that says it.
Okay, fine. Okay, yeah, exactly off the point. What?
This is
It's in Ksubas. What?
It's a very famous thing. Right? That's the
So what's that? So I don't want to get into text or anything like that right now. Okay, so Zot there. So why is Rambam passing? Why is Rambam passing that it's a mitzvah and a mufchar to give 1/5? So the Paiskim say that the Rambam is coming from a Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says, "Be'usha nimnu that a person should be mafresh 1/5 of his money limitzvah." So the Yerushalmi is a different nusach than the Bavli. The Bavli is saying is takamash, a person should not give. At most, you should be giving 1/5. Yerushalmi is saying that it's a mitzvah to give 1/5. Now, you'd still care. So ask a shaila, though. Who cares? The Rambam should be passing. The Rambam is true that it is more nighted to Yerushalmis than other Rishonim. But that's usually only when they're in the face of a non-mefurish Bavli, where a Bavli is unclear about its opinion. Then he will go with Yerushalmis over Bavlis. But here you have a Bavli that seems to be saying very clearly that there's no mitzvah to give a chaimish. It's an hamavazve. It's someone who's being flippant with his money, who's being irresponsible almost, who gives 1/5. So why is he going with Yerushalmi, who says that a person should have a mitzvah and a mufchar to give 1/5?
Someone who's a 5th is being irresponsible, or someone who's irresponsible with money, you gotta give a 5th.
Doesn't say, but it does. It says hamavazves al yivazves. Don't give more than 1/5. It's very clear that it means it's not saying that there's a mitzvah.
Money as it comes, whatever, you gotta give a 5th because you doesn't mean it.
Not more, you mean.
Oh, you mean hamavazves means generally he's spending money a lot, not hamavazves when it comes
Right.
to tzedaka. Interesting, but it's still the lashon is still al yivazves yosh mechoimish. It's still saying don't give more than 1/5, but it's not. It doesn't say anywhere in the Bible you should be giving 1/5. But it could be. I guess you're saying that's where it's a mefurish. That's a Yerushalmi. That's where there's no mefurish Bavli. What were you saying, Zevi?
That may be similar, but that maybe means that somebody that can't afford to give up, meaning somebody that can't afford it,
Yeah. So that's what I think. That's what I think the answer is. Putting all these things together is that the Rambam held there's no machlaikas between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi, they're both the same concept. It all has to do with how much a person can afford. So there's the guy who could afford, who all this doesn't mean. 1/5 doesn't mean anything to him. Some want to say even that person a half, maybe not more than half. Okay, whatever. Yesh l'adam. It's not everyone agrees to that. But there's the guy who has so much money it really doesn't mean anything to him. Here's kashir de mechsar. That's the shir deraisa of the Torah in a situation at least where he's the only person who can support the son. He has to give whatever he needs. That is his share. But then there's dargas based on what you can afford. The guy who's making $1 million a year has a mitzvah and a mufchar to be giving 1/5 min nechosov. He should be giving 1/5 of it. The guy, a person who's tighter than that, for him it's al yavazves yosher chomish. Do not give more than 1/5. Like the Ramah says when he paskins it, he says the al yavazves yosher chomish lo yitzarech l'priyos. So person, it's all. That's always the problem. Is it possible that this is going to cause you to? Obviously, everything's possible. What I'm saying saying, is it responsible in a way that you may need to come on yourself to tzedakah by you giving so much money? So for a person, by him giving so much money, might need to be coming on to tzedakah and borrowing money from people or asking people for favors. That person should not even be giving up to a fifth, and certainly not more than it. Someone else who's totally fine giving a fifth, it's up to a fifth. Not more than that, not more than a fifth, unless you're someone who money is like almost inconsequential to you have so much money. That's what I think the Shiurim are in the Rambam.
Well, you're not saying that person makes $1 million should give a fifth. You're saying that if he wants, he can give a fifth.
It's a mitzvah namufchar. It doesn't have to. No, it's a
So
mitzvah
you're saying he can give
namufchar.
a tenth as well.
Yes, you could give a tenth as well, but the mitzvah namufchar is to give it would be to give a fifth. I have no idea what the budget for someone who makes $1 million looks like. Could be I'm wrong,
You don't know what else.
Right? Yeah, it could be. Obviously, every situation is different. Every town you live in. I mean, there are some communities and I think that every kid costs $30,000 tuition. It can get.
You're dumb.
Some crazy places where they shush you at Shalosh Chodesh. Now you're on the recording. Shush you at Shalosh Chodesh and charge you $25,000 for tuition. Okay. Now, fine. That's. Huh? Okay. So now the question is fine. So this is the concept. The Shir Midiraisa is Dei Mechsor. That's really the Shir Midiraisa. Now, but then that's not practical for everyone. So the bottom line is a person at least needs to be giving a third of a shekel every year. Big discrepancy between those two. Huge discrepancy between those two Shirim, and a lot of in between. And we come up with this Chamishas Nechasav, Ma'asim Nechasav. Like, where is this coming from? What type of Shir is this?
Why was the Rambam so clear in his 4 dargers, or 3 or 4 dargers that you gave? Why is it not like give what you can, minimum this, that? Like, why was it so like different categories when it's like?
Sounds like a good question. Sounds like something we talked about maybe when you were talking to Chaim before. Yeah, that was a question. It's a good. The question's better than the answer. I think the idea is what I was trying to suggest is that these are not shiurim in mitzvah tzedakah. What it is basically you have one type of guy who can afford whatever. That type of guy is Dei Mechsor. Once you're not in that category, then it's a percentage of your money. Where did we get that from? We'll talk about in a second. Where we get the idea. But once you're out of the category that you can just give without consequence, now you are in the category of what we call middle ground, regular people, middle class. Middle class people go by a percentage. They don't go because you never have a share really. You always might be giving more shalei tzarich leviyos. So it's just a question of you're sitting down with your financial advisor, and here the Rambam is your financial advisor. What is responsible to tzedakah? Responsible is a certain percentage should go to tzedakah. There's no longer an amount. So you understand, like it goes into a different category now. Once you're in that middle dark.
Why was it so categorized? Like,
but he does say in each of these things. He says,
in the middle of these two,
what?
They're not.
They're going to come from somewhere. We'll see what the mucker is. They come from somewhere else in the Torah, and they will clarify it a little more. But the point is, they are the category for someone. And even the Rambam himself speaks out on all these people if you can afford it. Right? It's a kol gadol. We'll get to it practically. Evidence know that when it comes to meiser, it's if you can afford it. It's not if you can't afford it. You're not giving meiser. It's not ayin ra to be giving less than meiser if you can't afford it based on your normal living lifestyle. But so the Rambam does speak that out.
Based on affording.
Well, yeah.
You're saying
But
it's
the question,
sliding,
you're still asking the question: where do we come up with 10th and 20th from whatever?
You're saying it's a sliding scale.
I'm not saying it's a sliding scale. I'm saying it's a totally different scale based on a category you're in. There's basically 3 different scales. There's the scale of the person who has so much money.
Is that what it is? The sliding scale is
No, a sliding scale is
As you
just
move on,
there's just
you
a go.
move-
A sliding scale, I think, is everyone is on the same scale and it slides. I think.
Yeah,
Whatever.
no,
We can
it's
debate the
important
meaning of
that.
sliding scale later.
Yeah.
That's how I always understand sliding scale. Is that it's one scale and we just slide it.
Is
That's
there
cool.
at the end of the slide? What type of slide are we talking about?
He's
One
getting
in
very
cool. I
very
think so. Okay. Anyway, so where does this come from? What is this din of meiser? Now, once and for all, we've been leading up to this now for 2 weeks. Like, what are we doing here with this meiser? Is this like a shir mitzvah tzedakah? Is it not a shir mitzvah tzedakah? We learn meiser. The Goyin says, where do we get the shir 10th from? We get it from a pasuk in the Torah that says aser to aser. right? It says by Meiser that you're supposed to take a Meiser or a field. There's a medrash that doctrines from that. Not only is that's talking about that parsha, by the way, just to get clear. What is the parsha of Aser Taser talking about? It's talking about two types of Meiser that are dependent on what year of Shemitah it is. It's either talking about what we call Meiser Sheni, right? First, just to get a little bit, there's Meiser Rishon. Meiser Rishon goes to the Levi. That's every year, except for Shemitah. Now, then you've got Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni is most years. It's year 1, 2, and year 4 and 5. Meiser Sheni is meant to be brought up to Yerushalayim, and you eat it in Yerushalayim. During years 3 and 6, you have what's called Meiser Oni. You give a Meiser field to the Aniyim. The din of the Torah that we're talking about are all from field. It's your grain of your field. Meiser Sheni. What do you mean? What is it? Is it hektish? And then you're supposed to eat in your slime. You have to eat in your slime. Is it moment hektish? Is it moment hedjit? You want to know? That's a big machlekes. That's a big machlekes in the Gemara. Is it moment hedjit? But yes, you eat it yourself in your slime, but you must eat it in your slime.
Remember, it is when I said it is. This is exactly.
Okay. Fine. So that's what the parsha of Aser Taser is telling you. Meiser Sheni and Meiser Oni. Now, Chazal Darshan, Aser Taser is kol towards Recha. Kol comes the rabbos, not only grain from your field, but anything a person makes. If you make money from lending, from whatever it is, any money you make, you're supposed to be taking Meiser from. Now, Kali Parson would say that drush is an asmak to ba'alma. It's not a drush midarai. So the parsha is definitely only talking about grain from a field in Eretz Yisrael. It's one of the mitzvahs at Tluyas Ba'aretz. We do not do Meiser Ani nowadays. We don't do Meiser Sheni. It's an asmak to ba'alma, a remez to us, to the concept of what a person is supposed to be doing with his money. Mikan, from this pasuk is where we get the mitzvah of Meiser. That's where we're getting a tenth. The Beis Yosef and others point out, hold on, that from these psukim and from the psukim of Yaakov Avinu, by the way, that says Kol Asher Titan Le'Aser Sanulach. Say we also get the mitzvah of Chaimish from here, because Aser to Aser, it's 2 times Meiser. The Kol Asher Titan Le'Aser Sanulach, a double lashon of Meiser. That's where they get a fifth from. That is the marker for this. Now, a couple questions I could ask here. First of all, this pasuk is not even talking about. It's not talking about tzedakah. It's not even necessarily talking about aniyim. It's talking about Meiser Sheni that you take up to Yerushalayim and eat yourself. What is this? How is this? How are these psukim teaching us? This is the klal of tzedakah. This is where we get it from. Like, what's the shot of that? Furthermore, I mentioned this last week. The Beis Yosef says that you're allowed to test Hashem in Meiser and say, I give Meiser, now you need to give me the bracha. Before Gemara, you're allowed to test Hashem when it comes to Meiser. It says the Beis Yosef, that's only by Meiser on the field. That's by Aser to Aser. We learn it from. That's by your grade. It has nothing to do with mitzvahs tzedakah, the Meiser we give to tzedakah. So then, okay, fine, that's his shita. We don't necessarily pass away. Others argue, the Torah argues, the Ravaz argues, and they say no, it's referring to tzedakah as well. That you can test Hashem. But if the Beis Yosef says the psukim of Aser to Aser are not referring to tzedakah, how do we learn anything having to do with the Shiur Tzedaka of Meiser from the mitzvah of Aser Taser? Yaakov Avinu, you mean? So Shatit and Aser Tzedakah. Oh, but if you tell Meiser, Avram also took by Sodom. You mean that's what you're referring to? Yeah. Okay. I think the vart is like this. I think it's over Pasha. Remember, there are 2 inyanim in tzedakah. There's an inyan of giving aniyim. Then there's also an inyan of a certain perspective that it's supposed to give us on how we relate to our money, how we relate to bracha from the Rebbeinu Shalom. That what it's supposed to be is everything that we do in life when we have nechasim is meant to be viewed as a shutfus with the Rebbeinu Shalom, as meant to be viewed as something that we do in partnership with Him. And with Him means Klal Yisrael. It's all one. Supporting Torah, supporting Klal Yisrael, that's all one with the Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's not just about specifically the money, it's about how we relate to our money. The parsha of Meiser, here is the key question. You have a guy, you have regular people that are working hard to make a living, right? They're working hard to get through life. They cannot be just giving every oni day mechsar. They cannot afford that. So now, if you want to understand, where are we going to look in the Torah to understand how much of your money is considered reasonable and responsible and the right thing to do? How much of your money should you be using for purposes that are not your own, for purposes that are of a higher calling, that are about Klal Yisrael, that are about the Rebbeinu Shalom, that are about tzedakah? That we pull out from the parsha of Meiser. That lesson is what we are learning from the parsha of Meiser. It's not a sheer in the mitzvah tzedakah per se. The sheer mitzvah tzedakah is day metzar. It's how much money he needs. He can't afford that. At least give a third of a shekel every year, right? There's no shear. It's whatever you can afford. It's a sliding scale, right? It's whatever a person can afford. But when we want to understand, okay, for regular people, what does the Torah expect of them to be able to give up every year and say this is reasonable, this is responsible, this is understandable? We come up with a remes and a smachta ba'alma from the parsha of Meiser, kol tzvus ha'echad, that even regular people, not just b'shas, that not just from a field, not just b'shas in Eretz Yisrael, a tenth of their money is depending on the situation, but it should be considered a reasonable amount to at least be considered.
Why?
That's something that you should be using, not because you have to give aniyim a tenth of your money. Because when you want to show that I'm a partner with the Rebbeinu Shalom and I don't view my money as a selfish possession that's mine and shali, shalcha, and I'm keeping it for my own purposes. I'm in this together with Klal Yisrael, with the Rebbeinu Shalom. A tenth of your money is the amount, because we see that from a parsha of Meiser, where you're supposed to take a tenth of your money and
eat it somewhere else.
I obviously, yeah. But what's the whole point? What's the point? What is the concept that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants you to do when he wants you to come to Yerushalayim and eat it? What's the psychological behind? What's the psychology? No, it's not even a thank you. It's you are going to do this on my terms. It is not going to be on your own terms. What that does for us, obviously, yes, the balancing the checkbook is a lot easier when you can do that. And by the way, in those times you already gave a meiser to the lady, so it's not like, we're just pulling out a concept here that when the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to set certain terms and to understand, hey, not all your money should be completely in your control to do whatever you want. Some of your money should be out of your control. And by the way, we like to play, we were talking about this last week, we like to play, God, so to speak, with our meiser. That's totally the opposite of really what meiser is supposed to be. First, to speak this out. The best type of meiser, Tzedaka, like you said, is anonymous. When you...
But you have a right. You have a right the same way that you have a right to give it to this slave or that guy.
You do have a right, but the best way to give, the halachal meiser, it's a Rambam, the halachal meiser, the best way to give meiser is anonymous when you don't even know who you're giving it to. The mitzvahs ma'asim in the Torah, you don't have any right to decide who you give it to. You got to leave a corner of your field to any ani. Incorrect what you're saying. That is the wrong type of attitude. You say, no, I get to decide what I want to do with money. That's the whole point of this. Is that's not what tzedakah is supposed to be. The Rebbeinu Shalom controls what goes on with our nechasim. We are in this together. Yeah, you're right. There's something called Tevas Hanah, and there are concepts where Lamaisa at the end of the day you get to decide. But the tzedakah, the best tzedakah, is not meant to be decided where you give the money.
So you're saying with regards to a field, I understand, but regards to, let's say you don't have a field. In that case, you do the same thing.
Giving money. Yeah, the Rambam says the best way to give tzedakah is to give. We don't even know who it's going to.
So
that is the best way to give tzedakah.
So you're saying the concept of tzedakah, secondly, part of it is understanding that the possession, that all worldly possessions aren't really yours, they're Hashem, and you're just simply giving back.
Right. You are a
Conduit.
A conduit, right, to do it.
But you're saying that the best way is not to know who you're giving it to. Well, you're supposed to give to what they need. How could you do that if you don't know what you're giving to?
The Gabbai Tzedakah come and say, I haven't only needed this, and that.
So what's the Gabbai Tzedakah? What's his responsibility then?
Huh?
What's the Gabbai Tzedakah's responsibility, and how does he decide? Meaning, is there an issue that he decides where it goes, or simply by it not being?
Well, first of all, I know the Gabbai Tzedakah doesn't have to know who the people are. Many moisters have systems where maybe
A full double blind.
full of line. The Rav and the Rebbe gathers information, decides. He gives over to the Gabbai. He gathers information, gives over to Gabbai Tzedakah to decide. The Gabbai Tzedakah has no idea who's getting, who's going to, and then the people who are giving have no idea who they're giving to.
Okay.
But I'm saying that's halacha l'maisa by all tzedakah. That is the best way to give tzedakah. It's incorrect. So I just say that's what I believe. What we're pulling out from Meiser is this idea. Let's pull it back. Let's rein it back in for a second. We're pulling out from Meiser is this idea that if you want to be a shutuf with your Rebbeinu Shalom and you want to say, you're right, I don't have full control. It's in your yad Rebbeinu Shalom. A Meiser is the shiur for that. And best we have a remez aser to aser is to give a chaimish. I mentioned last week the story brought in Taisvus where a guy had a field that was very much gebenched. The field was making 1,000 kor every week, and he was giving 100. He told his sons to continue this minhag. They said they thought better of it. They decided, they're gonna only give less money. So the field only ended up making 100 kor as opposed to 1,000. And basically the line there is Hashem told him, until now I was fine letting your father be the balabas and I would be the kohen. Meaning what would come to me would be the 10th. I would be the kohen in it. Now that you're deciding that now that you're deciding not to do this, I'm going to become the balbas, and you're going to be the kain, and here's your 100 kor that your father was giving laniyim, and have a good day.
What was the story?
It's brought in Taisvis in.
It's a very known story. I've heard it.
It's brought in Taisvis in Tainas Daf Testament Aleph. Okay, anyway. Now, so what is the point of this gather? Let's just get one thing straight. Okay, so we have this gather. It's not the point I'm trying to make here, and the key point is that Meiser is not a shear in mitzvah tzedaka. Mitzvah tzedaka is one thing. Meiser is a shear that we're pulling out that gives us a gather for how much money you're supposed to play around, so to speak, and give to other people, and kind of like relinquish your control over it and say, here, it's for the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's for a higher calling, it is for a better thing. What does this gather do? Number one, it's important is that it gives you a cap, a roof for how much money you should be giving responsibly for tzedakah. A fifth, maybe a tenth. L'mashal, let's say there's a halacha that when people come knocking on your door, if they need, you have to give them. Say if an Edwin comes to your door, you have to open your hand. Now, the question is, this is very hard, and certainly we all can relate to this. It's not so easy nowadays. If you're every Arvin that comes knocking on your door to give money to, and certainly you go to shul. Let's say even if you say during davening they have no right to ask you, fine. But even not that, okay, you walk out of davening, they're asking you Pesach Tifchas Yotbel, you have to open your hand to him. So the Poskim say it's an important thing to know. It's a major mile having given meiser. Once you give a meiser, you're putter from them. That's the amount. The Torah's amount is meiser, even when an ani stretches his hand, say you do not have a mitzvah of tzedakah. What?
Even if you go for it and you gave meiser.
You don't have to. Should you? A mitzvah no up to a fifth? More than a fifth?
You gave the fifth already.
Then you can't. Then they're telling you that's not, unless you're someone who's making so much money, right? Then that's not. You shouldn't really be affording that. Now wait a second. If you played corners on all your fifth and you got to a fifth by doing this, that, and that, maybe that's a different story. But I'm saying, but if you really gave a fifth of your money, you're not supposed to give any more than for regular people. So you don't have to do that. You should really not be giving. There's $1 here, $1 there. I don't have exact. This is I'm not saying I gave a fifth. Sorry, I can't give you $1 today. That's negotiable. But it does gives you a maximum amount for it. Now, a couple other nafkaminas based on this, and then we'll hold it here. And like I said, we'll get more into practical stuff last week. What I'm saying again here, the ikar chiddush that I'm saying is that the shear of meiser is not a shear in tzedakah. There's a mitzvah tzedakah. There's tzedakah levad and meiser levad. Meiser is a shear that we learn, a conceptual idea that we learn how much money a person is supposed to dedicate to a higher cause, to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to purpose that are outside of him, but it's not necessarily mitzvah tzedakah. So there's a Bach that the Bach says, a very famous Bach. We don't pass the halacha, the thing the Bach says, but conceptually we do pass like the Bach. The Bach says, there's a concept that if, let's say, a city is mechayev, everyone who lives in the city to give $500 to tzedakah. You must give, if you are part of the city, it's a tax. You must give, that's essentially what it is. Social welfare tax, let's call it, right? You must give for aniyim $500. Everyone must give. The halacha is you can't, for meiser ani, you cannot use that cannot be part of your meiser ani. It's called pareya chayvrin on meiser, you're not allowed to do it. Zok the Bach, that's for Meiser Ani. Meiser Ksafim that we give nowadays, a tenth of Meiser, he says that's min Haga Ba'alma. It says Lechiv, Lo Midiraisa, Lo Midirabonan, it's just Minag Ba'alma. So you could even be Perech Chavin Meiser. And the Taz, often this is in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Lamed Aleph in your idea, the Taz says, what is the Bach talking about in Haga Ba'alma? It's Paskin in Shulchan Aruch, Meiser. Shulchan Aruch says, Shir Tzedakah is to give a tenth. How is the Bach saying? Oh no, it's just an Indian Ba'alma that we give Shkaich, that we give Meiser. I think the pshat in the Bach is what the Bach is saying is this is not a sheer in mitzvah tzedakah. Because mitzvah tzedakah, what this is a conceptual idea of what a person is supposed to be dedicating some of his money to something that is, like I said, it's a higher cause. So for that, it could be prei chayva min ha'meiser. It doesn't matter that the city decided you have to do this. That's giving some of your money to something better. Are you mekayim mitzvah tzedakah with it? No, you're not mekayim. Mitzvah tzedakah has to be something you're not mechuyev. You don't have to give, not by law, not by mitzvah. Maybe you're not mekayim mitzvah tzedakah. But for an Indian of meiser, he's saying you can do it. I said we don't pass like this back. By the way, just know that we don't. You cannot be perech chayvay even from meiser ksaf and the place can say. But conceptually, they do. The Chazon Ish, the Steipler, they said the ikar is like the bach that meiser ksafim is minhag ba'alma. It's not a chiyuv giving meiser. What? In Meiser, he's saying, Meiser Ksafim, he's saying, is just a minhag that you have to give a tenth. There is no mitzvah. The Rabbanan did not say a person must give a tenth. That's not what the Rabbanan said. They never said that. So the Taz is asking, what do you mean? It says in Hilchos Tzedaka, a person is supposed to give a tenth. It's a shiur. Maybe it's only a shiur l'katchila, but it's a shiur. It's a shiur in a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to do it. So the Bach is saying no, because it's not a shiur in mitzvahs tzedakah. It's a conceptual idea that we pull from somewhere else in the Torah to just teach us like a maximum amount, to give us like a cap, to give us draw a line in the sand and say, here, like this is what the Torah considers to be reasonable.
This money that the tax is not included in whatever.
What?
This
Harei
tax-
Achlev Min HaMeiser, paying a Chlev
for the poor
Meiser.
people,
Yeah.
that's not counted into your Meiser money where you gave money to stuff because it is going to poor people. That's not counted in
That
this.
the Bach agreed with. The Bach says yes. I said we don't paskin that halacha l'mayin. So when you have to, in certain situations at least. I'm not sure about that. I want to think about it more maybe before next week. But we pashtas, we don't paskin like the Bach Benegay, that when something you have to do something, you can't count it for
We
Meiser.
have to give tzedakah, so that is have to do. What's the have to?
I understand what you're asking. I want to practically, for the practical nafkamina of it, I wanted to give it more next week. There are cases where poskim say this, that you can't be, this idea, you can't be pre'achlayv, meiser. You can't pay up something, you can't pay a chiyuv. You can't use meiser for something you have to do. No, it's not like property tax. Like they're talking, like the classic example of it is shul membership. If it's chayv, if you have to pay it. Tuition is where Moshe uses it. Welfare tax, like you want to know in Israel, welfare tax. Well, welfare tax here is not going to Jews, so it's not going to help you.
Fine, so not Jews.
In a Jewish state, you want to know if welfare tax, can you use it from Meiser? Like the Bach, you would be able to. I thought we don't pass like the Bach, but you're right. Maybe because it's going Laniyim, we do pass away. That is the case, the Bach.
Property taxes and certain like.
Right, I understand. Believe me, I'll get back to you next week. But I'm just bringing out the point from the Bach that the Bach is clearly understanding it's not a shiur in mitzvah tzedakah. There's going to be another major discussion. This is going to be very important next week in the practical shilas of it. Can you give meiser to stuff that are mitzvahs, right? Can you, to a shul, can you give meiser, right? Aliyahs, any of this stuff, things that are mitzvahs. Let's say mitzvah you're not mechuyev in. Let's say everyone agrees you can't buy an esser with meiser. You have to buy an esser. So you can't buy an esser with meiser. It's something you don't have to do. You give out of the bottom heart, you give to your shul. Is that considered meiser? There's a big discussion about it. It's going to be a major discussion.
What if you give money to someone and you disguise it as a transaction? For example, you already have a lulav and esrog.
Yeah.
And you know this guy is on, you already bought your esrog, and he's selling esrog and you want to give money.
Right.
And you essentially overpay like $100 for an esrog to him. Does that count?
100% tzedakah, beautiful tzedakah, one of the best tzedakahs you could do.
Yeah, because this is like
You give a guy a parnasa, and 100%. I'm talking about you have to.
Buying a lease, is that considered?
So buying is also all this type of stuff are big shilas, yeah.
No, but is that called a chiyuv?
Oh, it's not.
No, not a chiyuv. No,
Don't
not a
say
chiyuv.
it, there's no.
No, but if you so it's like, so if you bought the aliyah and you said, I'm not going to pay meiser money for this. This is going to be separate from meiser, and then later you're like, it was Simchas Torah. I think I am going to use meiser from it. Then it's Berei Chav Min HaMeiser. That's when the person will say you cannot use meiser then at that point because you owe the money already to the shul. But before, if you had in mind when you create the chiyuv that it's going to be from meiser, you could use meiser from it. Now, let me ask you something. For Iker Mitzvah Tzedakah, can you pay a shul for Iker Mitzvah Tzedakah? You want to be kind. You're shlishi sach shekel. Remember that $2.50 you got to give every year. Can you give that $2.50 to a shul?
Is that adopt the money, or
Huh?
should it adopt the money, or it could be to any?
I think it's pasha. You read the psukim. It has to be Tanani. Ki yeh b'cha evyon. The psukim say. The Gemara says. The Gemara says. I thought of this and I was like, it's pasha's right. The din of the Torah, the din in the parsha in the Torah of tzedakah has to go laniyim. There was no question in my mind. Now I thought, oh shoot, I'm wrong. Why? Because where do we learn shlishi zashekel from? It's a pasuk in Nehemiah. What does the pasuk in Nehemiah say? It says everyone in Klal Yisrael had to give a third of a shekel to the Beis Hamikdash every year for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. I'm wrong. They've been kind of give upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. I opened the Bava Basra, Daf Tesam Aleph. Taisus, one line Taisus at the bottom. In fact, Taisus, what are you talking? This is not tzedakah. This is bedek habayis. How can you kind of tzedakah with bedek habayis? So Taisus, we're learning a kol shekain. If they had to give the bedek habayis every year, kol shekain, you have to give tzedakah. You have to give aniyah that much. Whether you like the Taisus or not, it's from a first Taisus like this Yisoid. There's tzedakah and there's meiser. They're two separate things. Meiser is not a shiur in tzedakah. It's a shiur in how much a person is supposed to use his money for higher calling, for mitzvahs, for good things. Tzedakah is the best part of it. Tzedakah is great. If you're going to give some of it to shul, you're going to give some of it to shul. One other, right? But you get the point I'm saying. You can't, but mitzvah tzedakah, you cannot be mekayim by giving it to a shul. Mitzvah tzedakah has to be la'niyim. The shiur meiser, because it's not a shiur in tzedakah, you can be mekayim al yedei.
Tzedakah over just good causes.
So that's a very good question. You don't have to necessarily, but the Chassam Sofer, when he discusses these types of shilas, says no problem. He's talking about a case where a guy promised to give his children who were learning in Kollel a lot of money, and then he couldn't really afford it, so he wanted to give some of his meiser to it. He says no problem. He says gives half to the children for their Talmud Torah, half laniyim, because ikar mitzvah is laniyim. Either it is or it isn't. Rabbi, leave me out of your stuff. I mean, either meiser can be given, either tzedakah can be given to my children, or tzedakah can be given to my children. So I said, it can be given to your children because it's part of shiur meiser. But there still is a mitzvah of tzedakah, and the mitzvah of tzedakah is a beautiful mitzvah. But al yimna adam, a person should not. Maybe you think it's too extreme shiur. But the idea, so why not give the whole? Because he's saying lemaisa, he's understanding because it's kifiyah sagazod. He's understanding there's a practicality element to it. Rabbis have to be practical also. This guy can't afford it. He's got to support his kids too. So he's saying maybe he was mishiring this guy. That half laniyim is the right amount that he can get.
It's a specific person, wasn't a shot.
It's like l'mashal. I get sometimes people call and they say they want to give, so they're feeling they're nervous about something going on. They want to give some extra money. They want to give some extra money to the shul. I said I don't think it's beautiful. No problem except the money. So I think probably the best thing is to find an oni who needs this money and give it to him. What do you mean? It's my either I can be Makai Meiser or I can't be Makai Meiser. Either a shul is good for Meiser or not. The answer is a shul is good for Meiser. A shul is good for using a tenth of your money for a higher calling. It's not mitzvahs. It's not kivrech Hashem. You want the real bracha? Find aniyim who really need the money. I know this is self-sabotaging. This drasha. I know people say I'm a terrible fundraiser, and this maybe is part of my being guilty of that. But the bottom line is I believe this is a parsha so very strongly. The mitzvah of Torah, what the Torah really wants, is giving it to everyone. Now, understand, there's a practical element to it, people, and this is what we're going to talk about next week in terms of the Schedule A, deductions using meiser here, and they're good cheshbonos. I'm not saying, as far as shiur meiser is concerned, it's a great cheshbon. Shiur meiser is about being a partner with your Rebbeinu Shalom, and you can be mekayim it in many, many ways. But don't mistake that's not mitzvah tzedakah. I think to put the chiddush as simply and maybe as powerfully as possible, I think when people say, I gave some tzedakah to the shul this week, that's not tzedakah. Maybe in a broader sense, because tzedakah is a hard word to translate. Maybe tzedakah, there are broader senses to it. But as far as the parsha and the Torah, mitzvah taf reish, I forget which number it is. I think it's taf reish ayin tes. No, that doesn't make sense. It can't be taf reish ayin tes. Taf ayin tes maybe. Whatever it is, mitzvah number whatever that comes from parshas rei. That's giving to aniyim. That's not giving to a shul so you can have a great kiddush and we can put out Don Julio at kiddush this week. That's not. It's just the shiur tzedakah is the chol hapachas. The chol hapachas, it's a third of a shekel. A third of a shekel is the chol hapachas every year. But it's also figuring out. It's up to a tenth of your money and figuring out. The Chassam Sofer told this guy half and half. The Chassam Sofer told him,
Talmud Torah is not no different than like someone's
Talmud Torah for your own kids. What Talmud Torah?
and in general.
Supporting a Talmud Chacham who needs money, that's even the best. What's that? There are many Talmud Chacham who are not aniyim, who don't need.
Give it to the shul where the Rav gives a shiur every Shabbos, 2-3 shiur per Shabbos.
I hope you're not Makayim. You're tzedakah le'evyon by making my set. I love it. I appreciate it so much. Don't get me wrong. Makayim. It's going to my beautiful new first floor. Don't get me wrong. I hope you're not Makayim by giving me money. It's a beautiful mitzvah. It's a great mitzvah. I don't think it's kiyeh b'chayavim. The pasuk says a poor person in money. It's meiser. It's a beautiful thing. You make like a disappointed face, and I say, but I don't think it's kiyeh b'chayavim. It's not a problem. It's meiser. Yes, it is meiser, but not tzedakah. And those are two important things to differentiate between.
$3 goes to meiser. It goes to the.
That's what has to be. It has to be. You're right. But still, if you want to know, but I understand. But if you want to try.
And supporting the community as a whole.
You could, 100% you could, and in many situations you could and would be right for doing it. But it's just a certain perspective to keep in mind that Also, you should be thinking about aniyim as much as you can. Not all your meiser should be going towards that. Especially, I mean, let's be real for one second. A lot of people sponsor kiddushes and shul. Great thing. They should keep it up. I'm pro sponsoring kiddushes and shul. But if it came a choice that poor people are going to suffer, or we can have hot shalom with the Shabbos, I better hope that Klal Yisrael is a little better than that. No. That's basically that's it. There we go. There we go. Of course.
So give him 5 pounds of Tupperware and say, go at it.
You're right, but we don't let women at the kiddush. What do we do?
We have to change that. Order more food.
But you can't be Mekayim Tzedaka necessarily with Meiser.
Yes. That is the basic idea I'm saying. I think that's a very important thing. So you can get a person, you can get your kiyum meiser lechatchila. I'm not saying this is a b'diavad, by the way. I'm not saying if you're giving part of your meiser to shul and sponsoring kiddush, then you're doing it in a b'diavad way. Chas v'sholom. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's lechatchila meiser. It's just not tzedakah. There's something to be said for mitzvah tzedakah. Also has a say at the end of the day.
So you're saying it's a separate thing. One's tzedakah, one's meiser. There's two separate exact.
No, they're not two separate things either. Meiser gives us a shiur for our tzedakah because it's the concepts are fused together. They're both concepts of using our money to be partners with the Rebbeinu Shalom and take care of the world around us. But if you want to know, are you mekayim the mitzvah midaraisa of giving tzedakah by giving some of things that you give ma'aser to? Not necessarily.
Not all giving away your money comes tzedakah, not all of it comes
You give money
tzedakah.
to a fake person. You thought you're giving to tzedakah. Like literally, he
Well,
came out
that's
to like
scam.
and found out he was a scam.
There's a Gemara.
Is
It's
that
a
You're not
Gemara.
mekayim tzedakah.
Wait. This is Rabbi. Isn't this a Gemara? This is a Gemara. It's a Gemara.
But second, yeah.
Then you're also okay. It's not like your fault. How are you supposed
Yeah,
to
I understand, but I don't. Maybe not saying fault, but I don't think mekayim mitzvah tzedakah. That could be meiser. You're good.
No, yeah, I'm asking.
I'm not
for
sure about
mekayim
that.
mitzvah
That's a good
tzedakah.
question about meiser. I don't think you're mekayim. You didn't do it. I don't know if you're going to get.
You don't know until
If
after.
you're going to
You're not
get
gonna punished.
I don't think you
That's
get
all I'm
punished,
asking.
right?
That's
So I'm saying if the guy sold you a lulav that you thought was a lulav, and it turns out afterwards it's not a lulav, it's the same thing. You paid $200 for this lulav. It turns out the guy was lying to everyone.
$200 for a little. That's more expensive.
So technically, the share of giving, let's say, a friend that's where it's. That's for Meiser, not for tzedakah. The share of
But just don't go to the share.
That's meiser. That's a sheer meiser, but it's not. But it's something that we teaches us about tzedakah, how much tzedakah is right.
Meaning, so a person technically could give their full, let's say even a fifth, to a bedek abayis. But he doesn't spend a third of a shekel. It's not being.
He's not mekayim mitzvah.
So technically, a person at least once a year should have to give whatever that
$2.
number is.
So yeah, I mean everyone.
I mean, obviously, but I'm saying in a technical.
Yes, technically it doesn't have that much enough amino, but it's.